Hello, Life Groups. Thank you so much for gathering today. We are in week 6 of our Simon Says series, and throughout this series, we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of Simon Peter. We see that he was called by Jesus to be a disciple, and he walked on water with Jesus until he looked at the storm around him. We see that Peter declared that Jesus was the Messiah, and he was even one of the few that got to experience and witness the transfiguration. But then last week, we saw the bad and the ugly where Peter denied knowing Jesus and was filled with guilt and with shame. The story tells us that Peter fled the scene and hid as Jesus was mocked and beaten, crucified, and eventually laid to rest. But then just 3 days later, the women came with news the tomb was empty, and I can't even imagine the relief that Peter must have felt and the joy that Peter must have experienced. But I can also imagine that in the back of Peter's mind, he's wondering how he and Jesus' relationship would be now. So we pick up the story in John chapter 21, and some of the disciples are fishing, but they hadn't caught anything. And as dawn approached, they saw Jesus standing on the beach, and he asked them if they caught any fish, and they said they hadn't caught a thing. And so Jesus tells them to throw their nets to the other side of the boat. And as they did, they caught so many fish that they couldn't even haul their nets in. Now, this story probably sounds familiar because this is very similar to what happened right before Jesus called Peter to be his disciples. Sometimes when I've fallen, or maybe you can relate, it's just good to go back to square one. It's good to go back to where it all started, and that's what Jesus does with Peter. And while they're having this meal together, Jesus asks Peter, "Do you love me more than these?" Referring back to Peter's boast that even if everyone else fled, if everyone else ran away, he would never leave Jesus' side. But this time, Peter doesn't respond with a boastful comment or with pride. He responds with humility. And then Jesus asks him a second and a third time, "Peter, do you love me?" 3 times Peter denied Jesus, and then 3 times Jesus asks Peter, "Do you love me?" And Jesus meets Peter right where he's at, in the midst of his doubt and his shame and his guilt and his honesty about his spiritual condition. Jesus met him right where he was and restored Peter. And for some of us, if we're honest with ourselves and honest with each other, our relationship with Jesus isn't where it should be. But the beauty of Jesus is that no matter what your past is, no matter where you find yourself today, Jesus stands ready to forgive and to restore. The beauty of the story of Jesus and the grace and mercy that he provides is that Jesus wasn't done with Peter, and he's not done with you and with me. Enjoy your discussion today.